This is Ruslan Belov speaking. So what do you think about the new round of negotiations between the Russian and Ukrainian sides? I remember that, judging by the comments, many people were afraid the Russian side might start giving up positions or show some kind of weakness. But things turned out very differently. And judging by the reports coming from the Western press, the Russian side reportedly said something like, "If you don't recognize the 4 regions now, next time there will be 6. And then there was this historical reference from Medinsky, who said he was ready to keep fighting for another year, or 2, or 3. We fought Sweden for 21 years. How long are you ready to keep fighting? We don't know the Ukrainian side's response, but recently Zelensky said that Ukraine cannot fight for 10 years because it simply doesn't have the resources for that. So, in general, the negotiations didn't go the way the Ukrainian side had clearly hoped. The fighting continues, and we continue analyzing the situation at the front. Let's move on to the map, and we're not talking about just 5, 10, or even 15 square kilometers being taken. The losses are bigger than that. In fact, this is already the 3rd setback in the past, 7 days. But let's go through everything step by step. We'll start from the north and work our way south. The main setback happened in the south, so make sure to watch the video till the end. I often see questions in the comments. What's happening in Kursk Oblast? Why don't you talk about it? Well, because nothing is happening there. The Sudzha district is fully cleared. There are no Ukrainian armed forces present, therefore no fighting. As for the Tyotkino and Novyi Put area, the Ukrainian forces were fully pushed out of Tyotkino. To be honest, there wasn't much to push out. At most, they had entered the very outskirts Chapaiva Street near the railway station. That's it. They were driven out of there. In the Novyi Put area, they didn't even manage to cross the border. So again, nothing to drive out. They remained all this time on the Ukrainian side, in Sumy Oblast, banging their heads against strong defensive lines. That's why Kursk Oblast doesn't appear in the daily reports, because there are no Ukrainian forces there. Much more interesting is what's happening in Sumy Oblast, especially in light of what was said during the negotiations yesterday. What was said exactly? Again, if the Ukrainian armed forces don't withdraw from the 4 regions and officially recognize them, referring to Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson, then next time there will be 6 regions. And one of those additional regions is set to be Sumy Oblast. So what's going on in Sumy right now? Preparations are in their final stages for a major upcoming operation to take Yunakovka. This operation is extremely important because without capturing this large village, which used to be a major logistics hub for the Ukrainian forces, it's hard to speak seriously about the possibility of a strike towards the city of Sumy itself. If there's any warning or threat here about taking a new region, such a plan, a push towards Sumy, is definitely being developed. And to do that, starting positions are needed. The key starting position is precisely Yunakovka. To give you an idea, it's less than 20 kilometers to Sumy. That's why there are active assaults happening in Belovody, to then move toward Yablonevka, and from there along the road to the western outskirts of Yunakovka. Fighting also continues in Lochnia. Half the village is under our control, the rest is either a grey zone, like the center, or still held by Ukrainian forces. But storming directly through Lochnia, honestly, is not a great idea, because the Ukrainian military constantly moves reserves into the village from Yunakovka. These villages are essentially linked together. So coming in from Yablonevka is a much more promising route. In short, the summer in Sumy Oblast is going to be very eventful. We'll keep an eye on it. Let's move on to the next sector, where yesterday the Ukrainian forces suffered another collapse. I don't have much to say about Kharkiv Oblast. There are ongoing heavy engagements around the Dvorichne bridgehead, with only minor advances here and there, half a kilometer, maybe a full kilometer at best. The last significant success was a couple of weeks ago when the village of Kamenka was taken. A few days ago, there was also an advance of about a kilometer from the west. And that's about it. No major movement since then. Activity near Kupiansk, in the area of Kondrashovka, has also died down. A month ago, by contrast, it was an area of intense fighting. The rest of Kharkiv Oblast is in a similar state, basically static for months. There's still hope. And do you know why? because from the Lyman direction, the front line has already reached the border with the Kharkiv region, right here near the village of Novi Mir, and it's precisely in this area where an escalation in Kharkiv region could soon begin, with the general direction of movement toward Borova. Well, we'll see. As for the Lyman direction itself, nothing significant happened in the past 24 hours. Yesterday, I told you that there were reports about fighting beginning for the village of Kolodyazy. Well, those battles are still ongoing, and reports claiming that Torsky has been fully captured, those are false. Whose lies? Local command or someone higher up, I don't know. But what I do know, according to the guys on the ground, is that our forces are only in the northern part of the village. I went into detail about this yesterday, so I won't repeat myself now. Let's move on. Good news came in from the Toretsk area. Yesterday, our troops advanced just over a kilometer north of Dakhne. In the village itself, Ukrainian forces are still present in a few houses on the northern edge. That section will soon be cleared, and the village will come under Russian control. Also, after several days of denial, American cartographers have finally marked the remaining parts of Mirolyubivka and Mikhailivka as fully and undeniably under Russian control. These areas were taken a few days ago. We discussed this earlier, but the Americans were still coloring half of Mirolyubivka red and marking the other half as a grey zone. After new video footage with the flag emerged, they were finally convinced and updated the map, marking the whole area red. Preparations are now underway for a major battle for the urban-type settlement of Novo-Ekonomichin. Capturing it will allow us to either begin an assault on Myronohad or bypass it and head toward a smaller town, Rodinske. In my view, the latter would be the smarter move, especially if the western flank, which is currently experiencing heavy but stagnant fighting, could finally start moving. Because look, we could then approach Rodinske from the east and also from the west, first through Hryshyn and then to Rodinske, and that's it. Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad would be completely encircled. Some units could press further, while others could begin storming operations with logistics completely cut off, which would significantly simplify the task of assaulting these cities. Attacking head-on right now, when they can still be constantly reinforced from the north, would only lead to another new Toretsk or Chasiv Yar scenario. Sure, we'd eventually take the town, but it would be slow and would cost us a lot of resources and effort. Now let's move on to the sector where the Ukrainian front once again collapsed. This time, the breakthrough happened just before the Dnipropetrovsk region. Take a look. If you remember, 2 days ago I told you that good news would soon come from this area and that a large area would be marked red. Back then, I was asked not to disclose the details. I kept my word. But now I can speak freely. Here, our forces managed to push the Ukrainian armed forces back by 4 kilometers over a front about 5 kilometers wide, actually even wider. We straightened the front near Novoalexandrivka, and the next task, already underway, is to align the line near Novonikolaevka and Kotlyarivka. Once the front line reaches this new position, we can confidently move further west. We've taken control of an area of 20.8 square kilometers, essentially 21 square kilometers. And note, this is already the third such Ukrainian retreat in the past few days where the losses exceeded 20 square kilometers. One was in the Mirolyubivka area, another in the Oleksandropil-Zaria sector, and the third is right here. And believe me, this won't be the last. I think this is exactly why yesterday's negotiations took such a tough tone, with the Russian delegation essentially issuing ultimatums. If there's no recognition and withdrawal now, things will only get worse. I think it's clear that our army is gaining momentum, while the Ukrainian armed forces are weakening significantly. More so than ever before, except perhaps in March and April of 2022. After that period, there haven't been any comparable losses for the Ukrainian side. But just this past week alone, they've suffered 3 major setbacks of over 20 square kilometers each. We'll see how things unfold during this summer offensive. It's quite possible that the numbers will be even greater. That's all for today's Frontline update. Now, a few words about the negotiations. The Istanbul negotiations, results of the first round. Some interesting points were made by the Russian delegation, as reported by military analyst Yuri Podolyaka. Firstly, the Russian negotiators reiterated what has already been stated many times by the President and the Foreign Ministry. The most direct path to a ceasefire is for the Ukrainian armed forces to withdraw from the territories already discussed. Only then can talks begin about a long and lasting peace. Naturally, this was not met with understanding from the opposing side. Meanwhile, Vladimir Medinsky, head of the Russian negotiation team, made it clear that traditionally Russia's conditions will only get tougher, and the response could include creating a buffer zone along its borders. He didn't specify what he meant by that, but the possibilities are vast, from Sumy and Kharkiv all the way to Dnipropetrovsk and Mykolaiv, with Odessa not far beyond. He also made it clear that Russia is ready to fight as long as necessary to achieve a lasting peace, and with sarcasm asked how long Ukraine is ready to fight. So, negotiations are at a complete deadlock for now. Both sides agreed to exchange proposals to study each other's positions, which effectively delays the process indefinitely. The only concrete agreement reached, unsurprisingly, was something for Trump to point to: a large-scale prisoner exchange. 1,000 for 1,000. So far, not a bad outcome for the first day of talks, according to the analyst. Here's what Medinsky said. Overall, we are satisfied with the results and are ready to continue contacts. In the coming days, a major prisoner exchange will take place. Secondly, the Ukrainian side has requested direct talks between the heads of state. We have taken this request under advisement. And thirdly, we agreed that each side will present its vision for a possible ceasefire in detail. Once these visions are submitted, we consider it reasonable, this was also agreed, to continue negotiations. Marco Rubio made a statement. I don't believe any significant results can be expected before a direct and honest conversation takes place between them. And as far as I know, President Trump is ready for such a dialogue. It's now clear what the real goal of these negotiations is: legitimizing the narrative of a personal bilateral meeting as the only way to resolve the conflict. At the same time, the Kremlin is in no rush to reveal all its cards ahead of the upcoming talks, but it has made it clear that a meeting with the American president is possible, provided there is a clearly agreed agenda. Russia insists that the meeting between Putin and Trump should not be just a symbolic gesture, but must serve a concrete purpose: to create conditions for real progress in negotiations and recognition of Russia's interests in global security. At the same time, Russia's stance on the Ukrainian track remains firm. Any temporary ceasefire concessions from the Russian side cannot be one-sided. Ukraine must respond clearly, offering concrete de-escalation steps rather than empty declarations. After all, it is Kiev, as the losing side, that needs the ceasefire. Moscow is open to dialogue, but only on terms that imply balanced steps from both sides. This is important not only to ease tensions, but also to show that negotiations can be real. Putin sees no point in discussing matters with the Ukrainian leadership that are decided elsewhere. A direct contact format with Trump allows Russia to pull the talks out of the chaos created by globalist influence over Kyiv, and finally move toward rebuilding Moscow-Washington relations. And one more note on the Istanbul talks. Everything we are witnessing now is a pre-negotiation, bargaining over the basic entry terms for dialogue, not about the core of a settlement. Russia is presenting the same starting demands: the 4 regions, the peninsula, the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces. But this is just the warm-up, because the real issues, neutral status, NATO ban, demilitarization, legal guarantees, arms supply controls and constitutional changes, haven't even been officially raised yet, writes Military Chronicle. Yermak, speaking on behalf of the entire Ukrainian government, confirmed that they are deeply afraid that everyone will compare Istanbul 2022 with Istanbul 2025. And this Istanbul is far worse for the Ukrainian side than the previous one. Russian forces have already approached Dnipropetrovsk region, and if Zelensky sabotages this round too, the next round of negotiations will be even worse. And everyone understands that. That's all for now. Subscribe to our channel, hit like, and stay tuned.